fascinating when a Yale professor put out a statement just a couple days ago saying settlers are not civilians. That statement is to justify the targeting of innocent children, women, and men who were massacred in their homes without warning, because to them, and they're chanting in the streets.
Combatants.
Exactly.
The settlers as not civilians is a variation of systemic racism, because systemic racism is a way of saying I don't have to find a racist. I don't have to find a white guy and a black guy who applied for a job. The black guy was better qualified. The white guy got the job. Hey, we found a racist, someone who did that. No, systemic racism locates the problem in a system. And similarly here, the settlements become the equivalent of the system. And so everybody in those settlements who could be innocent themselves, they could even be kids, nevertheless become occupiers.
Yeah, I remember I was at a protest for Native American issues, and they were saying our land was stolen. It's a sacred burial ground. And when I asked the activists, I was like, what part of it is the sacred burial ground? And they're like, oh, all that. And I'm like, and just that? Like, well, all that too. And it basically
just a vague hand gesture everywhere.
But it's sort of where my hand is pointing.
to be fair,
as the eye can see.
These are just leftist activists saying this.
Right.
And so I'm not speaking on behalf of Native Americans who are concerned about what land they may have had burial, cemeteries or whatever on. But the activists' view was all of it. Just everything you can see belongs to them and should be reverted. And it's like, well, hold on, that's not reality. Okay, people live here. We're not gonna, we're not gonna go to some dude's house in Pittsburgh and be like, well, I'm sorry, man. This, 200 years ago, this land belonged to somebody else, so it's gone now. That's insane.
Not only that, but I mean, think about it this way. The whole claim is just based upon what you got there first. I mean, does the first Bedouin who arrives at an oasis own the oasis?
Also, they weren't there first. There was another Indian tribe they slaughtered. And before that, there was another Indian tribe that they slaughtered. They were just migrants slaughtering one another until the white man came with his guns and won a war. And that's how territory is taken. How do you think Israel was created?
Not just that. When the Native Americans were warring with each other to take land, white men showed up and warred with each other over that land, and you had colonial inter-European conflict in the New World. It's just the world is...
But only white or Western, whatever you want to say, European. I mean, I generally like white people, but one thing I really hate about them is this weird suicidal gene they have. There's no other ethnic group. There are no other countries that say, we suck. We suck here. You can have our country. No, every other ethnic group, we're the best. Hispanics are the best. It's not even Hispanics. It's Mexicans, Ecuadorians. We crush, we kill. No, only white people. We suck.
Well, here's the dangerous thing about the left's ideology. It is only applied to the United States because when you bring the same concepts to Europe, things get really weird because they talk about indigenous rights. So what do you end up with? You end up with white identitarian groups in Europe saying indigenous rights. We completely agree.
Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, they hold the signs saying indigenous people's rights, and they make the same arguments the left makes here as to why they oppose immigration in Europe. And it's like, well, okay, I mean, that's the left's argument.
I'd rather
right?
take Israel as our lodestar. If we could do 1/10 of what they do. Oh, did you see my proposed solution for what's happening in the Middle East? I think it's really perfect. We take all their Palestinians. They take all our illegals. They get drywalling. Yeah, we don't have a problem.
Well, it's interesting how they keep describing Israel as this kind of occupying power without asking, well, wait a minute. How did this region start out? Well, first of all, the Jews were there first. It was their land. Then they go into the diaspora. The Romans smash them and they take off. Then you get a bunch of Muslim farmers and sheep herders over there. But Islam comes around in the 7th century and conquers that whole region, which was, by the way, almost all Christian. Jordan was Christian. Syria was Christian. So these are Christian lands forcibly conquered by Islam. And yet somehow Islam gets out of this sort of reputation of being an occupier, and they're somehow able to pin that on the Jews. I mean, it's just a kind of an amazing sleight of hand.
I mean, yeah, I do not know a whole lot about the history. I do know that when I grew up going to Catholic school, many of these cities were Jewish cities, like where, Jerusalem, etc. And just based on that concept alone, should we go back and say, oh, no, it's not free Palestine, it's free Israel, it's right? Or Judea, or whatever it was.
I mean, when I was in Israel, this was last December, it's really fascinating because they're doing all this archaeological work. And they're finding out that many of these artifacts are coming up now that are validating the Hebrew scriptures. I mean, people for a long time think about it. There was no independent evidence that Jeremiah or, these prophets of the old David or Saul ever existed. But suddenly you pull out a medallion, or you pull out a writing and it's like King Saul, King Solomon. You suddenly realize, wow, there's the historicity of the Old Testament is being affirmed by secular modern Israeli archaeologists. Now, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, it's establishing the historic claim of the Jews to Israel.
Well, actually, I went to a coin store, and they had one of the old coins that was minted around the time of the birth of Christ, and is believed. I don't know if the coin that I bought was one of the coins used by Saint Casper, but it was the same currency used by Saint Casper, and that's my understanding is after researching about it, buying the coin, it's verified, historical, in like a box and sealed and graded and all that stuff. That quite literally, yes, there was a guy. He was given currency. It was minted for him so they could fund his trip. Don't know if that specific coin was used by him, but around this time, I gifted that to Seamus because I thought it was, it meant something historically. But yeah, generally this stuff happened, right? Whether or not you believe in the greater faith-based narratives of the religions or whatever is something else. But these people were here. They did these things.
Exactly.